There is no OKC model for the Jazz to follow. There's a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander model, but not an OKC model. Next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps and on YouTube. Thank you to the everydayers who make Locked On everything that it is. Today's show is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. All right, on today's show, we will, at the end, start using our Locked On local experts and draft experts to get insight on some of the picks. We've talked about VJ Edgecombe a lot. We've talked about Trey Johnson a lot. We've talked about Ace Bailey a lot, all floating around number 5. Con Knipple's gotten some conversation. We probably need to talk about Malowich a little bit more. Those 5 players seem to be the ones in the fit for the 5th pick of the NBA draft. We now also have the 21st pick to look at. We'll get to know those players better. Rafael Barlow, host of Locked On NBA Big Board, says if he's Philadelphia, he takes Trey Johnson at 3. Is there a chance that Trey Johnson is going to go 3 to Philly, never get to the Jazz at 5, or that Trey Johnson and Ace Bailey are beginning to separate themselves from VJ Edgecombe? We'll talk about that. We'll start with the fact that we have a new team in the Western Conference Finals, the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the single most common thing that you hear from Jazz fans is, well, we'll follow the OKC model. Let's be clear. There is no OKC model. They've done a lot of things brilliantly. There's a lot to learn from what they've done. They play in a certain style we should be looking at. They're doing things about the possession game that are unique. But there's no OKC model. They received in the trade for Paul George the MVP. There's a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander model. This whole thing is that they got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and either he turned into, or they turned him into, or a combination of both, into an MVP. But there's no one out there that can follow this Oklahoma City model because it's singular to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There are some changes in the way teams are rebuilding. Oklahoma City, Houston, and Utah all traded existing players for a plethora of draft picks that then yielded them more swings at it, as Justin Zanuck talks about a lot, to be able to build their roster. Okay? The fact is, though, if we really dig into what Oklahoma City is going to end up getting for these various deals, I think they've got it. Their 2 best players, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams is a pick from that same draft. And so, yeah, and then they tanked to get Chet Holmgren. And they tanked for 2 years. The models, if you want the models we can follow, Orlando's probably a model. Detroit's a little bit of a model. Houston's a model of moderate successes. All have made the playoffs. One of them won a playoff series. Or didn't. No, Detroit did not win a playoff series. Battled in the playoffs. Looked to have bright futures. Those are models. That's the tanking model. Right? Detroit is doing it with the most difficulty. Because the Detroit Pistons, when they moved off of Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson, got nothing for those players. 0. And in turn, They went through 5 years of losing. 5. 20 wins, 23, 17, and 14, and just made the playoffs this year. The Houston Rockets are a little bit of a model because when they traded James Harden and various other pieces in the process and moved on, they did acquire a few pieces extra. And then they lost for 3 straight years, 17, 20, and 22 wins, went 41 and 41, had good lottery luck. We'll see if it turns out with anything. Reed Shepherd made the playoffs and lost in the first round. And Orlando did a little bit of both. Orlando, in some ways, is probably the most similar to Utah. They traded Nikola Vucevic and some others, got them Franz Wagner pick, got them Wendell Carter Jr. They lost for 3 years, 21, 22, 34, and have made the playoffs for back-to-back years in the watered-down Eastern Conference. There's a ton to learn about Oklahoma City. A ton. Sam Presti has done a masterful job. Their style of the way they play defense is worth digging into. Their mechanism by which they own the possession game is worth digging into. Frankly, the way they tanked, where they had Al Horford or Derek Favors or players on their roster and extra salaries, and so it wasn't such a difficult thing to do. But it's also worth noting that a lot of this is incredible roster development and player development. Shai, the whole model Shai. Nothing of this happens without Shai. And Jalen Williams was the 12th pick of the draft, which came from the LA Clippers in the Paul George trade. So that trade has yielded, so far, that trade has yielded 2 incredible players. Now, I'm actually not sure they're going to get anything else out of that trade, which is probably fine. They don't need much more. But the original 2021 first-round draft pick was Trey Mann, who they've moved off of. Their 2023 first-round draft pick ended up going to Miami. Their 2024 first-round draft pick was Dylan Jones out of Weber State. We'll see. I mean, they do a great job developing talent. They still, by the way, have a 2025 first-round draft pick this year and a 2026 first-round draft pick. I mean, it's like the trade that never stops giving. But we'll see what those turn out to be. Not the point. What they also deserve credit on is Lou Dort. And these are the things the Jazz can learn from. Can we do this? How did they diagnose that a 6'4", 220-pound Pac-12 Rookie of the Year in Lou Dort out of Arizona State, who the rest of the league said, he shoots 30% from 3 and he's wrong-sized for his position, and they somehow grabbed him as an undrafted free rookie. He only played 36 games his first year, 52 his second, but he started as 20 minutes a night player and then became a 30-minute and has become a stalwart. Aaron Wiggins, who's probably their 5th or 6th best player, went and spent 3 years at Maryland doing mediocre things but being pretty good, and somehow slid to the 55th pick of the second round. And Oklahoma City grabbed him in his rookie year. He played 24 minutes when they weren't good, and then he's played 18 and 16 and 23, and they have him on an easy contract. Isaiah Joe, thrown on the scrap heap by the Philadelphia 76ers, and Oklahoma City identified him as the great shooter that he is and grabbed him for free. Kendrick Williams. Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams. These are the pieces that are replicable. But the model, follow the OKC model. There is no OKC model. There's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There is a style of play. They're forcing of turnovers. They're not turning it over. The way they play it in transition, they've had edges over opponents on the fringes for years now. They're doing stuff right. And that can be learned from. And their player development is incredible. How do we do the same thing with that? And their ability to turn non-shooters into shooters is transformative. But in regards to tanking, amount of years losing, big picture things like that, no OKC model. Orlando, Detroit, Houston, those might be replicable. Detroit got a number 1 pick. Orlando got a number 1 pick. Houston got a number 2 pick. Do it for enough years, maybe you get one of those. Is Trey Johnson going number 3 to Philadelphia? Rafael Barlow of NBA Big Board says he is. It's next on Locked On Jazz. Today's edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross and in Logan. Chevy is Americana. The Chevy trucks, the Silverado and the Colorado are everything that you've ever wanted if you're going to be a truck owner. And the lineup of SUVs, incredible at Chevy. The Suburban and Tahoe, I like to call them the Utah County assault vehicles. A lot of 20-year-old stereotypes about Utah in there, as well as the Blazer, the Trailblazer, the Equinox, and the rest. And the electric tracks, Volt has gotten people rolling as well. It's all at Murdoch Chevy, and the Murdoch's 80-plus years in Utah, making sure you have the no regrets experience. So if you're in the market for a truck right now, or you're looking for a Chevy, we've got you down at Woods Cross and in Logan. So email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com so that I can get you the VIP experience you deserve by being a locked on everydayer with Murdoch Chevy. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Every night is delivering high-worthy performances on the ice, on the court, on the Major League Baseball field, wherever it might be. Major momentum shifts, WNBA. Can't miss the moments, whether it's game-winning shots or breakout players. Never a better time to get into the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player prop bets, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have way more ways than ever to play smart, and to win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments? What combine of live prop bets mid-game can you put together to get the big winnings? It's all there. If you ever get to read who's heating up, back it up with same-game parlays. And how could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if you win your first $5 bets? Pretty good right there. So that's right. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting apps, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've got all of our local experts out there with the various takes on all the players that are available in the NBA draft. One of the big debates was the NBA Big Board yesterday had a debate on whether Trey Johnson or Ace Bailey should go 3. Let's get a little breakdown on who each of these players are. First, we'll start with Isaac Shade, our Locked On College basketball player. Our host, if you're not aware of Ace Bailey, he's out of Rutgers. He's 6'9". He's generally talked about as the 3rd pick, but there was some doubt from NBA Big Board. But first, here's Isaac on Ace Bailey.
Ace Bailey is a phenomenal talent, but due to some parts of his game that need refinement, is it worth spending a top 5 pick on a player who's not ready to be a bona fide star from day one? That's the question that teams picking 2 through 5 in the draft after Cooper Flag goes number 1 are going to have to answer. There's also the why wasn't Rutgers better with 2 top 5 draft picks question. Now, as for Ace Bailey, he can pull up from anywhere and hit anything. His talent as a shot maker is one of the best coming out of the college ranks that I've seen in a long time. His size and length and athleticism scream prototypical NBA wing, but Bailey has a lot of growth when it comes to decision-making and handling the basketball. To balance his offensive giftedness, I was impressed by the strides and desire Bailey took defensively in his lone year at Rutgers. Those physical, God-given attributes should translate to great success defensively if he continues to apply himself. There's also the potential for playing multiple positions in this positionless age, which is great when that person is 6'10", 210. If Bailey can become a more consistent shooter, make better decisions, grow in his handle, and keep making strides defensively, the sky's the limit.
So here's where the debate happened. Rafael Barlow, James Barlow, Leaf Tulane, all on Locked On NBA Big Board yesterday. discussing who goes 3. And the premise of the debate, a little bit, is what Isaac Shea just talked about. And that is, how urgent is Philadelphia? Rafael Barlow's point is that Ace Bailey's not ready to contribute right now. He's got all of those areas where he needs to improve. And so if you're Philadelphia and you're this urgent and Paul George is 36 and Embiid's got his issues, you've got to go to Trey Johnson first. Trey Johnson's a better shooter. He's a better passer. He's going to be able to score. He's more immediate, being ready to play. That's the argument from Rafael Barlow. Now, James Barlow and Leaf Tulane took a little bit of a different angle. Their approach was a little bit more that, wait a sec, they already have Jared McCain. They already have Tyrese Maxey. How does Trey Johnson fit into this? Leafs up the ante, says he thinks that Trey Johnson will score 25 a game in the NBA. I did say I thought it could be Bradley Beal, so I don't totally disagree with that. But that's an up. That's a big 25 is a big jump from 20. And thinks that he still goes with Ace Bailey. They fits better. Here's what Locked On Longhorns host had to say about Trey Johnson in his
Trey
career.
Johnson is a walking bucket. What's up, guys and gals? BK with Locked On Longhorns here, telling you about maybe the best scorer in this year's draft. Trey Johnson, as a true freshman, led the SEC in scoring a season ago, averaging close to 20 points per game. Remember, the SEC, the best conference in college basketball history this past year. Trey Johnson stood alone atop the league. He is a true 3-level scorer. He can hit threes. He can make from the mid-range. He can slash and finish at the 10 as well. He's also a great free throw shooter to boot. This game has always been about getting buckets, and Trey Johnson can get you some buckets. He's an emotional player. He wears his heart on his sleeve, but man, when he gets hot, he is tough to stop, and he is going to make one fan base very, very happy at the next level. For more on the Texas Longhorns, subscribe to Locked On Longhorns on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, all right. There does feel like a little bit of like the Trey Johnson thing. It's interesting to me. Here's my perspective. Might be wrong because I don't follow this all year long. When I suddenly started watching film of the top players in the league, watched Ace Bailey, watched Cooper Flagg, watched Dylan Harper, watched Ace Bailey, and at the time brought up the idea that if Ace Bailey's really 6'10", which turned out to not be, whether you might go Ace Bailey over Dylan Harper. Like 6'10" matters to me. Then I watched VJ Edgecombe, and I watched Trey Johnson, I watched Jeremiah Fears, and as you've listened, if you're an everydayer, to me, Trey Johnson was just a completely different player than these other guys. Like, I just was all in immediately. It's beginning to feel to me, and at the time, if you went to the various big boards, Rafael Barlow's big board has Trey Johnson now at 5. The Ringer big board had him at like 11. ESPN's had him at like 8 when I was doing this. And I'm watching this going, what is going on? Now, sometimes what I do think happens is that college people watch college players, and I don't watch any college, know nothing about what works in college, and I watch it solely from NBA view, and it's like, oh, well, this either does or doesn't work in the NBA, and that's actually all that matters right now. Right? Con Knippel's a nice player. Thomas Sorber is a nice player. Liam McNally's a nice player in college. I got to figure out whether those 3 guys can play in the NBA when we're talking about it here on this show right now. Luckily, I don't have to do that for a living, or else I'd go crazy. The fact is, to me, Trey Johnson just looked totally different than these other guys. He's an NBA player. Immediately. 20 points a game. Immediately. Go back to the show. It's beginning to feel to me that the rest of the league is going there too. And it begins to feel more and more like Trey Johnson at 5 feels unlikely right now. What's interesting to me about this debate between Raphael, James, and Leaf is what was unsaid. And that is that the name VJ Edgecombe never came up. Philadelphia has Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey, 2 undersized guards, neither of which are very good defensively. Along with Paul George, who once was a good defensive player, probably is not now. Joel Embiid and whatever they do around that. It would seem to me that a 6'4" Victor Oladipo modeled player like VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor with incredible athleticism, the body and physical makeup to be a good defensive player, somebody who did get his hands on a lot of balls and impacted steals, and I think had some pretty good stat numbers, should be in the conversation. The fact that he was not even in the conversation on Locked On NBA Big Board spoke volumes to me. I've always said this. What is not said is often most important. But have we really gotten into a debate here where Trey Johnson may go 3 to Philadelphia? Ace Bailey then goes 4, and VJ Edgecombe just slides to 5. Not a bad choice for the Jazz at all. And it does feel like there's 3 good players here after the first 2 in this draft, and then a little bit of a dividing line, depending where you think Jeremiah Fears is. And that maybe Trey Johnson never gets to Utah. That's beginning to feel more and more likely on this end of things to me. And then what gets tricky on all of this is for us, and this is just a longer conversation for another day, Trey Johnson to me had a unique skill in that he can just put it in the basket as our Longhorns host said. Whereas VJ Edgecombe, Jeremiah Fears, I'm not sure. I think they both will be better than Isaiah Collier and Keontae George in their careers. I think there's high possibility of that. But are they right now? Don't know. And then it just gets tricky on how you're getting all the minutes out. But that's what happens when you're developing lots of young players at one time. It's pretty fascinating. All right, we're tapping into our local experts today, as you've heard, and we're going to find out a little bit more about some of these players floating around the 21st pick. Yesterday, we talked about the possibility of who I should take if they were on the board. We had a choice between Thomas Sorber. We had a choice with Liam McNally out of UConn. We had Will Riley. We had Jace Richardson. You voted. I'll say what you had to say, and we'll look at those players as we continue next on Locked On Jazz. On the last 2 days, we've thrown up some YouTube questions for you on our Locked On Jazz YouTube page. If you're listening on audio, I still love you. That's the old way we did it. We still love you for it. It matters. First question was, would you trade for Zion Williamson? And the number still sits at 62% are saying no. Here's an interesting one that took place over the time, by the way. On May 9th, I asked if the Jazz get the second pick, or let me take that back. On May 15th, I asked, who do you want to have fall to the 5? And 54% of people said Ace Bailey. 33% said Trey Johnson. 13% said VJ Edgecombe. Okay. So that was on the 15th of May. 5 days later, I asked the same question. What prospect do you think the Jazz should consider at the 5th pick? And Trey Johnson vaults ahead of Ace Bailey, 46% to 36%. VJ Edgecombe at 12%. And Jeremiah Fears at 6%. What happens if the choice is going to be VJ Edgecombe, Jeremiah Fears, or Con Knippel? Then who? Maybe that'll be today's poll question. I asked the question, would you trade the 5th pick? I just told you the result on this. Yesterday, with not as many votes, because not as sexy a poll, who would you take in the Locked On NBA mock draft with the 21st pick? And the choices were Jace Richardson, Colin Murray-Boyles, Will Riley, or Thomas Sorber. That's kind of who was on the board. 33% took the young, small point guard, Jace Richardson. Jason Richardson's son, he's 6 feet tall, out of Michigan State. 26% took Colin Murray-Boyles. 24% took Will Riley. 17% took Thomas Sorber. I watched Thomas Sorber yesterday. It's very hard.
Thomas Sorber is a
good enough to project this. Honestly, sorry, Isaac jumping the gun there. He plays with his back to the basket. I didn't think he had things. Here's what my take on him was. Plays offensively, he doesn't play anything like what he's going to play in the NBA. He plays back to the basket. He took an occasional 3 almost like he had to. I didn't see him dribble. He doesn't have a dribble drive game. He can play a little handoff game. He whiffs on about half his picks. He runs around acting like he's going to set picks, but he very rarely makes contact. I thought he got dislodged a bunch of times on rebounds. He blocked some shots. He runs well. Defensively, I didn't see him be able to make second actions. I'd see him go to one thing and he gets beat on the other side. So I don't think he's going to be an elite, like in second actions is a Rudy Gobert concept. So we're talking about the greatest of all time, or one of the three greatest of all time. So I was lukewarm. And admittedly, I have a hard time figuring out how I look at a 6'9" guy who plays back to the basket and how he's going to play in the NBA, because that's nowhere near any way he's going to play. So I turned to Isaac Shade of Locked On College Basketball for
Thomas Sorber is a throwback big at 6'10", 255. The problem is that the NBA isn't often looking for throwback bigs that can't stretch out beyond the three-point line. So the question NBA front offices are going to have to answer, does everything else Sorber brings to the table, which is a lot, negate the lack of shooting? Because in his lone season at Georgetown, Sorber scored 14.5 points to go with 8.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.5 steals, and 2 blocks a game. So while the three-point shooting at 16.2% and the lack of modern big lateral mobility are massive concerns, the combo of Sorber's adept passing out of multiple situations, his rim protection, his motor, and his touch around the rim, those are going to be more than enough for an NBA team to want to snatch him up. There's also the issue of his season-ending foot surgery at Georgetown this year. That always scares me with bigs, so we'll keep our eyes on that. But if the three-point shot can develop, Thomas Sorber could be one of the steals of this draft.
The lack of lateral movement's what I saw on the non-second action defensively. That Isaac just mentioned there, that jumps out to me a little bit. All right. Colin Murray-Boyles, interesting player out of South Carolina. We talked about it a little bit on the show yesterday. He's like, the first thing is, he's kind of like the mini Draymond Green. Okay, well, mini Draymond Green doesn't exist in our league. So kind of who is he and what does he do? He's huge. He's 6'9". He's like 250 some odd pounds. He's got good ball handling skills. He's certainly non-traditional, but like to the comment of Lou Dort and some of these other things, like what is it that that Oklahoma City was able to do and find? This might be one of those guys. The numbers on Murray-Boyles are in transition. He's in the 94th percentile. They're interesting. In isolation, he's in the 88th percentile. Okay. So on 55 attempts, he ran 17 pick and rolls. He did fine, but he only ran 17. As a roll big, he was pretty good. His shooting, terrible. 12th percentile. Catch and shoot, 15th percentile. We don't have anyone with these kind of shooting numbers that projects to be a shooter. Here's, from our Locked On Gamecocks host, a breakdown on Colin Murray-Boyles.
This is a top-heavy draft, but Colin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina may be the most underrated player in this year's draft. Not just because of how good he is and the things he does that other players don't do in this draft specifically, but also because of the fact that he's still so young and the ceiling is still so high. Personally, a little biased here, obviously, covering South Carolina sports, but the things that are most impressive about him, one, he is the best defensive player in this draft. I don't think that's really super up for debate. There's a lot of teams that have scores. There's not a lot of teams that have a defensive presence as good as this kid can be. And he did it at a team that was one of the worst, if not the worst, in the entire SEC. Never gave up, never stopped playing, still gave a ridiculous amount of effort and intensity on every single night. That was shown, obviously, from him scoring double-digit points and averaging 17 points per game over his final 17 games this season. He scored double-digit in 16 of those 17 games. Also had 10 double-doubles on the year. Was phenomenal down the stretch, even though South Carolina was completely out of playoff contention. Saw him in the SEC basketball tournament, put up 20 points on Tennessee. Also put up over 22 points or more in 3 of his final 4 games. Like I said, he's a great scorer. The surface is only being scratched there, but defensively, he may very well be the best defensive player in this draft.
Pretty big statements there from Chris on Locked On Gamecocks about Colin Murray-Boyles. Let's go to my preference, Will Riley out of Illinois. Here's what the Illini host said about Will Riley, who I pretty much am leaning toward the 21st.
Will Riley might end up being one of the best scorers in this NBA draft. My name is Sonny Verma, your host of Locked On Illini, and it was such a pleasure to cover Will all season long. Will came with a lot of fanfare. He was the highest ranked recruit for Illinois in the modern era, and he did not disappoint. a 3-level scorer who can find his own shot. He can attack the rim. He can shoot the 3-point shot. As the season progressed, he got better with his playmaking skills. And I would argue by season's end, Will Riley was the best player on a 22-win Illini team. I don't know where Will Riley's going to eventually end in the NBA draft. I do think he has potential to go in the late lottery pick, but I will tell you one thing. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to regret passing on him.
So this is an interesting comment right there, that he was the best player on a team that had Jakovicius on it, right? Like, that's a heck of a comment. In Big Ten play, Riley ended up shooting just 27% from three. So like when we say he's a 3-level shooter, he went 23 of 84 from 3 in Big Ten play. If you look at him month by month, he opened the year shooting brilliantly from 3, 18 of 36 in November. In December, he goes 3 of 23 from 3, 13%. He shoots in 5 games in December, he shoots 28%. Then in January, he shoots 33% and 26% from 3. Pretty brutal. From February on, he becomes pretty good. I'm not comparing, but Donovan had a little of this. Donovan had a little bit of like, oh, I finally figured it out. And if you look back at his year, it's as though he figures it out at Nebraska. On the last game in January, overtime game, he dropped 16. He's pretty much never in double figures. And from that point on, he's in double figures every game for the rest of the year. He ends up shooting 48%, 34% from 3 the rest of the way. He shoots 77% from the free throw line, which is fine. He averages 16 points a game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists to close out the year. I'm not sure he was their best player. I think that might have been a stretch. And in the round of 32 against Kentucky, he's terrible. He goes 1 of 7. He just doesn't have it in that game. In the NCAA tournament, he has a very good game against Xavier, the first game of the tournament. But he's interesting. He's 6'8", a lot of fanfare, great NBA body. I like it when you can take a 6'8" guy and go to multiple preps on him. All right, using the local experts of Locked On. Nobody else has this. No other network in the country has somebody covering every single team. That is the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Jazz today. Tomorrow, an Ask LOJ edition of the show. If you don't follow me on socials, please do. DLock09 all across the board. If you haven't subscribed to the show, we'd love it if you do. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. They still matter. They help everybody. They make everything a little better. Let everyone else know about the show. We greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much. It is Locked On Jazz. We now send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA channel, Locked On NBA Plus. Check out Locked On NBA Big Board, the debates about the draft all week long.